Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. You're with me, Mazlina Ismail from IKIM Inspirasi Inforia Islami in this program, Great Works of the Muslim World. And Alhamdulillah, this week, our sharing on the next episode of Great Works of the Muslim World with our guest, we welcome Dr. Muhammad Husni Muhammad Amin, Senior Research Officer at IKIM Center for Science and Environment Studies, or SKIAS. Assalamualaikum, Dr. Husni.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh, Mas.
How are you?
I'm good, Alhamdulillah. Thank you for inviting me again on this program.
Our pleasure. To know on the next episode or our next hero on the Great Works of the Muslim World, this week we'll be speaking on Ibn Fadlan's Risalah, Mission to the Volga. So how would you like to introduce Ibn Fadlan to our viewers and listeners, inshallah?
Thank you, Mas. So today we decided to bring up the topic about this figure, Ibn Fadlan, and his full name was Ahmad Ibn Fadlan Ibn al-Abbas Ibn Rashid Ibn Muhammad, and he was born in the year 879, so that's 9th century, and he died in the year 960. And he's commonly known as Ahmad Ibn Fadlan, or even Ibn Fadlan as short. So who was he? He was a 10th century Arab Muslim traveler, and he was famous for accounts of his travels as a member of an envoy or an embassy of the Abbasid Caliph al-Muqtadir, who ruled in Baghdad. And this envoy was sent to the king, King Yiltawar of the Volga Bulgars, the Bulgar people who lived in the on the Volga River, in parts where now we know to be Russia. So he was famous by his travel account, as you have correctly mentioned, Risalah, which means an account or a journal. So it's essentially his travel log. So what is significant is that his account is most notable for providing a detailed description of the Volga Vikings, the Vikings who had plied the river Volga, including eyewitness accounts of life as part of a trade caravan and witnessing a ship burial by the Vikings. And his detailed writings have been cited by numerous historians. They have also sparked the debate whether whether he has met some of the more prehistoric human beings, the Neanderthals or the Cro-Magnon at the area, and they have also inspired entertainment works. In the 90s, I think there was a novelist by the name Michael Crichton who took parts of his text, by the text of Ibn Fadlan, and combined it with Western classic Beowulf to make a story, to make his novel, to produce his novel entitled Eaters of the Dead. And later, this novel was adapted into a film called The 13th Warrior, which starred Antonios Banderas. And from contemporaneous sources, the sources that we can narrow down to his own lifetime, Ibn Fadlan was described as an Arab, and the primary source documents and historical texts show that he was a faqih, someone who is learned in fiqh, in Islamic jurisprudence, and also in matters of the religion, and that he had served for a while in the court of Al-Muqtadir, and it appears that from his writing that prior to his departure on his historic mission, he had already been serving for some time in the court of Al-Muqtadir. And he was sent from Baghdad. In the mission set out from Baghdad in the year 921, and he was to serve as a secretary to the ambassador to Al-Muqtadir, ambassador to King Giltawar, the king of the Bulgars, and they launched in on 21st June to 921, and the leader was Susan al-Rasi, and the primary mission was to explain Islamic law to the recently converted Bulgar people, and who were living in the eastern bank of the Volga river. In what I said just now, this river sits in Russia, and Ibn Fadlan, he served as the group's religious advisor and lead counselor on matters pertaining to the religion. And the second part of the mission was that the envoy was sent as a response by King Giltawar to help to ask the Caliph Al-Muqtadir to send some help for them against their enemies, the Khazars. Now you might ask, who were the Khazars? So the Khazars were semi-nomadic Turkic people who were in the late 6th century. They during that time they had established a commercial empire covering the southeastern section of now the modern European part of Russia, in southern Ukraine, Crimea, and also the nation what we know to be Kazakhstan today. Yes, so they created a powerful, meaning one of the most powerful polity that they broke up from the Western Turkic Khaganate. While Khaganates, this is the way that the Turkish people they established their power in that area. So each polity is named Khaganate, and so we know today that the Khazars, they had formed a buffer between the Rus and also the Byzantine Empire, and this is a place where it was populated by the Scandinavian people, the ancestors of today's people, the Finnish people, the Norwegian, and also the Slavic people. So that's a little bit of how Ibn Fadlan started out on his mission.
Right. So it's actually dual reasons, which is for Islamic religion-wise and also political.
Yes, to propagate Islam, and also for political reasons.
Yes. Okay. Thank you. So going back to his observations that he made in his journey, what were the interesting part? Would you like to share with us in his book, Risalah, inshallah?
Yeah. So a substantial portion of Ibn Fadlan's account is he dedicated it to the description of the people whom he encountered along the way, and these were the tribe of Rus, the ancestor of what we know to be the Russian people. So and many modern scholars, they assume that the tribal people whom he encountered were the Volga Vikings, and it can be surmised from this is that Vikings weren't exactly a racial identity or a tribe, but a profession, people whom they were traders, and they were likely of Scandinavian origin, and many of the people, they were a mixture of Finns, of Slavs, and others, and they appear as traders who set up shops on the riverbanks nearby the Bulgar, and they were described as having bodies tall as palm trees. They had blonde hair and ruddy skin, and every one of them have tattoos from Ibn Fadlan described as from the tips of his toes to his neck, meaning they are entirely covered in tattoos. In
Okay.
tattoos, with colors dark blue, dark greens, and with floral designs and animal designs, and each one of them, actually, especially the men, they were armed with axe, sword, and long knife. They were also raiders. I think there's a series going on Netflix, The Last Kingdom. It talks about the Viking, the Danish people who were attacking the area that we know today as England. So they also contributed to the formation of the English people. So
Mm-hmm.
Ibn Fadlan describes the Ross as perfect physical specimens, and
Mm-hmm.
his report consists detailed description of the Viking customs, how they dress,
Mm-hmm.
their religion,
Mm-hmm.
whom they prayed to, and also sexual practices. And
Mm-hmm.
he was also an eyewitness to a ship cremation. What happened was that uh, in the event that some noble person among the Ras died, so they had an elaborate ritual which included also bloody sacrifice, and
Mm-hmm.
also they will put the body of the noble person who had died on a ship, and then they will set it to sail, and then they will fire arrows. They will shoot fire arrows on that ship, and then will let it burn, and then it will sink into the river. And
Okay.
also, prior to that, the ritual before they burn the ship, uh, he also saw shocking ritual involving a priestess called the Angel of Death. So, with regards to hygiene of the Russia people,
Mm-hmm.
Ibn Fadlan describes them as disgusting and shameless, especially regarding to sex, with which they perform openly in groups, and he considered them to be vulgar and unsophisticated. And so one other aspect that Ibn Fadlan focused was their religion, and also how Islam was spread and institutionalized
Mm-hmm.
in these territories.
Mm-hmm.
Like I said before, the Volga king, King Yiltauer, had invited religious instruction. He wanted to know more about Islam. Therefore, he had sent correspondence. He was corresponding with Caliph al-Muqtadir, asking
Mm-hmm.
him to send people, teachers, to teach them Islam, as well as this is a way of Iltawa showing homage, recognizing that the Caliph had superior military forces. But if we read carefully in history, only 50 in the decades before the Caliph Musta'in, he had recruited, you know, recruited uh, a vast number of Turkic people to form the bulk of his army. So
Mm-hmm.
that's why I think they look up to the Abbasids, and so they called the Abbasids to send over teachers to teach them about Islam in
Mm-hmm.
exchange for financial and military support. And Ibn Fadlan, that's why Ibn Fadlan was sent there as a faqih to spread Islam and also to commit diplomacy. And we know that how he is considered to be a faqih, because during his encounter with the Bulgar, he
Mm-hmm.
described some of the religious, ritual mistakes that they made. So they asked them to pray whenever they prayed wrongly. They asked them to pray again, and then uh, so he had known that these people, they were practicing some form of an imperfect or doctrinally unsound Islam, meaning their understanding of Islam hasn't
Okay.
been perfected at that time. So that's a little bit about the interesting observations that we care to discuss, highlight in this book.
Right. Thank you. I
Yeah,
think he must
yeah,
have, written it right, because at that time we don't have internet like today, so for him
yes,
to
yes.
describe a situation,
Mhm.
people, you need to have a very good language skill.
Yes, so that's
Yeah.
why I think he became a faqih, and then faqih you
Mm,
have to have, the proper intellectual tools. You must be well versed in
right.
Arabic. You must know
Yes.
the aspects of the religion, and also you must memorize, Quran and also hadith. So
Mm,
these require very strong memory. I think he has also sharp powers of observation and immediately to
mm,
recall the details which he have seen and put it down into writing. These are useful skills as a diplomat, as a scholar,
yeah.
and also
Yeah.
observer of cultures.
Yes. So okay, now would you give us a
All right.
brief rundown of the book Rihla?
Okay, so the book, uh, which I have the Penguin version with me here. There is
Mm-hmm.
also an edition published by New York University Press. That one has
Mm-hmm.
a parallel, English Arabic text. That is one of my favorite. But for the common people, we can read this much easier, simple for common people. And so chronologically, we read how he recalls his departure from Baghdad, what was the
Mm-hmm.
purpose of his mission, and then how he traversed. They traversed the route of Transoxiana in Rai and Khorasan.
Mm-hmm.
Now we know them to be Iran and also Central Asia,
Mm-hmm.
and then going through Bukhara, the birthplace of Imam al-Bukhari. Now we know it to be in Uzbekistan, and
Yeah.
in Khwarizm, and then Jurjania, that's now known as Gurgan, and also through the land of the Turks. Now we can
Mm-hmm.
assume that this is going through Anatolia, where the Turks are making incursions into the Byzantine Empire, and then they were marauding, and the Byzantine Empire had sent soldiers to fight with these marauders, and that's where he met the Ruzia, the August Turks, the ancestor of the Turkish people today. And there he described, these were Turks, pre-Muslim, pre-Islamic Turks, or some
Yeah.
of them have recently converted to Islam, and like the Bulgars, the
Mm-hmm.
understanding of Islam hasn't been perfected yet. So
Mm-hmm.
he records there were also unhygienic people who wants nothing to do, who had wanted nothing to do with water, and that's instance where they had to be careful when they want to make ablution in front of these people, because
I
they
see.
thought that using water tantamounts to casting a spell upon them. And then he
Oh.
records to them some of their cultures, their punishment for adultery, where people, they were not yet Muslims, but they already had some of this cultural, legal system where
Mm-hmm.
they take, couples guilty of adultery, and they tie them up on trees which are bent using a rope, and then when they cut the rope, so the trees will be released, so the people will be torn in half. So that's how harsh the punishment during the time when the Turks were during their pre-Islamic time. And
Yeah.
also they had matters of theological discussion. They had asked him about God. For instance, that place it was during winter time when they had traversed that time. So the time it was very cold, and they had asked Ibn Fadlan, what did God want with them to punish them with cold. So Ibn Fadlan replied to them, he wanted you to say La ilaha illallah. He wanted you to say that there is no God but Allah, and they followed him with their respect. And also, he described their marriage customs, and also a feat of horsemanship. This is where I think this is a factor where the Abbasid Caliph, took interest in their military skills, because these nomadic people, they relied heavily on horses, and they lived by their horses, and they had excellent horsemanship. They say that these people can shoot bow while riding a horse. And one such skill that Ibn Fadlan described in his book was that one such rider was riding beneath a flying goose. And when he is beneath the goose, he could aim and release an arrow and will strike the goose while moving at high speed. So that's how how skillful they were. I think this is why there's such a choice to make the Muslims and have them serve in the Muslim armies, gave the Abbasid armies later the advantage to engage the Byzantine Empire. And later in 11th century, we can see such a huge victory. For example, in the Battle of Manzikert, where for the first time the Muslim army defeated the Byzantine army and captured a Roman emperor, Romanos IV. And later we get to the part where Ibn Fadlan describes crossing many great rivers. There were rivers Yaghindi, Jam, Jaksh, Udil, Ardin, Warsh, Akhti, and Wabana. These are many great rivers that they had to cross. And finally, the part where they reach the kingdom of the Saqaliba, which is their name, the Muslim name for the Bulgars. Now, why Saqaliba? You might ask, because they were the Slavic people, and Slav in the Greek tongue were Slavenos or Sklavios. So when you Arabize that, it becomes Saqaliba. So because the Arabs, they didn't have the letter V, they substituted with ba. So that becomes Sklavenos becomes Saqaliba. So that's where we learn how the king of Saqaliba wished the protection of the Muslims against the enemies, Khazars. So that is the rundown that I can give on this book, Risalah by Ibn Fadlan, Mas.
Interesting. I already would like to read the book, inshallah. But
I'm sure you do. I'm sure you do.
Yeah. But at this point, what do you think is the significance of his work? Today.
Yeah. Okay. So the Rihlah of Ibn Fadlan is one of the earliest accounts that we have encounters between the Muslims and the European worlds in the 10th century of the Common Era.
Yeah.
So we've already, as a summary, we can see that it contains his observations in richly detailed descriptions of the various tribal people whom he met along the way. This includes the Augustus, which we have mentioned, the Vikings, and also the Rus, the ancestors of the Russian people. So the significance of this work is that it gives us the historical background of nations and people that we know today, the ancestors of the Turkish people, the Europeans and Russians. And also, so with regards to geopolitics, if we want to understand geopolitics today, we want to understand why that part of the world have so many conflicts. It's because of this. It is something that has been going on since the 10th century, and it is it describes them why they are still fighting today. So it gives us a description of the complexity of geopolitics, although now we see that conflicts happen, wars
Mhm.
is a bad thing, that we think that war shouldn't happen, but at least this gives us a window to understand where were the roots of these conflicts in the first place. So
Yes.
that much that I can give as conclusion today.
Right. And also, we have spoken, I mean, we have shared also other rihlahs made by other authors, such as Ibn Jubair and then Ibn Battuta. So we see different eras of descriptions of the people, of the time, of the era. And that's what makes it interesting and also historical text as one of.
Yeah, you're absolutely right on that, Mas. Because in the previous episode on Ibn Jubair, remember I said that Ibn Jubair's version of Rihla served as one of the best, travelogue edition that we can find
Mhm.
in the middle age of the Muslim history. Yet
Yeah.
Ibn Fadlan, and also I think in the NYU Press edition, together with Asirafi, who traveled to China in India in
Mm.
915.
Mm.
These two works serve as, I mean, the prototypical type of
Mm.
work with that serve as, if Ibn Jubai is the foundation, then
Yes.
we can
Yes.
find its roots in this type of work by Ibn
Yeah.
Fadlan.
Amazing. Would you mind to show
Right.
us again the book that you're holding just now?
Yeah, sure.
Uh,
Okay. Yeah.
is there any way
So
or anywhere we can get the to
this is
receive?
easily available. I think we can go to the large stores like Kinokuniya, or this one I got it from my friend Pelita Zihin,
Okay.
who supplied this sort of book, and I think this is
Yeah.
the easiest edition that people can read. But
Right.
for people with academic background, with scholarly inclinations, you can try source for the NYU. And then there's another version.
Mhm.
There's also another paperback version released by also NYU by the same translator. I think Tim McIntosh Smith. You know this
Uh-huh.
this translator. So
Right.
yeah, that's it.
Okay, great.
All right,
Well, this
all right.
is our second last episode. We will have our final episode next week with Dr.
Yeah,
Muslim Muhammad Amin on Great Works of the Muslim World. Would you like to leave
I
it
see.
as a surprise again for our
Yeah, I
final?
think better leave it that way. We can
Sure.
keep our viewers and listeners waiting for the
Yeah.
suspense for the closing episode before we take a break for this season.
Yeah. So inshallah, we look forward to have our next recording. Next sharing on the great
Inshallah.
work of the Muslim world with Dr. Husni. Inshallah. Thank you very much. And until we see you again. Assalamualaikum.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.